since we signed off on Monday, they did announce on Tuesday that Mark Briscoe, in fact, was going to get the green light to appear on TBS and headlining the show, no less, against Jay Lethal on what would have been Jay Briscoe's 39th birthday. And this was, I think a welcome surprise for most that it was looking like Warner Brothers Discovery was not going to be allowing this to happen, as preposterous as that sounds, given that Mark Briscoe was not even the person at the center of the controversy involving Jay Briscoe. But nonetheless, for whatever reason, minds were changed, and we got what is probably going to be among the most memorable matches, ceremonies, whatever you want to call that last 20 minutes of the show that you are going to remember. It was just a really wonderful tribute that I'm just glad they got to do it on this size of platform.
Well, I think a lot of the reason was because of Tony Khan, and really the audience. I think, I think it was pretty evident last week that Tony wanted to do it but was not allowed. And I think having the audiences and the public's outcry for...
Well, it's not like they changed their mind last week when all that outrage began after Wednesday. I mean, it was Thursday everyone realized what the game was, that they were not going to be allowed. And and Tuesday the match gets announced. So I'm sure
maybe it was planned and they just didn't announce it until Tuesday.
I don't know.
Whatever. I mean, but bottom line is it took, I think, at least the outcry from the audience, and a promoter who happens to listen to his audience and was able to kind of probably present a lot of the evidence from the public out there to the execs at Warner to convince them.
It probably helped dramatically that people were so vocal about it, because I'm sure Tony Khan was pushing for this last week, not necessarily this match, but to do a tribute 24 hours after. And we saw what, they were working with last week. So I'm sure it was the public reaction to this and all of the glowing tributes for this individual that I'm sure in the end played a big factor in, the idea that this was going to be not allowed on your broadcast. And instead, what you're going to have is one of the most memorable moments in Dynamite's entire history.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was a wonderful bit of news, that we got the fact that Mark Briscoe was allowed and that we were able to at least get some closure, for a national audience that I think sorely needed it after such a terrible story that seemed to unite all of professional wrestling together.
It was just so great to see Mark Briscoe out there. It was this was not one of, throughout the show, we've seen some incredibly hot crowds for AEW. And I would say it was a fine crowd, but it was certainly not at some of the recent levels. And then that main event hits and that audience, they were so engaged. That was, they just were so into everything in that match. And it was, just the perfect way to lay out this match and end it with the Jay Driller, and then you had the locker room coming out. It's just a fantastic scene, and I just thought it came off. It was so classy, and it was a wonderful, wonderful tribute. I have nothing beyond that to state, and I'm sure many people having the same reactions. A very emotional, 20 minutes of television.
I think the wrestling audience needed it. Knowing that it was Mark Briscoe and Jay Lethal that, evidently requested the match, I think Mark Briscoe really needed it. Just sitting at home with your thoughts and just all that stuff. Sometimes going to work is the best medicine. It's the best distraction, to help you deal with your grief. And I hope tonight provided, a lot for him and his family.
Yeah, we will talk about this more during the review of the show, but that's obviously the big story. There was a vigil that was held tonight in Delaware, in Laurel, in honor of Jay Briscoe, and there's going to be a funeral this Sunday in the Laurel High Gymnasium, which is where Jay Briscoe, attended high school and where he was serving as a assistant coach for the football team at the high school that his son Gannon plays on. So that is happening on Sunday. There's going to be a visitation and then a private ceremony. That's this Sunday. The fundraiser is now at over $315,000 that they have raised. incredible generosity, and they keep these donations keep pouring in as well. And I imagine that the shirts that they are now selling, I imagine those have to be. I don't imagine they're going to be able to keep those in stock with the amount of orders that I'm sure are that Pro Wrestling Tees is being flooded with, and all the proceeds from that shirt are going to the family as well.
A lot of wonderful ways to support and show your love for this family that's going to be very much in need for a long time. So wonderful to see the wrestling community that's usually at odds with each other more often than not, but in this case everybody's coming together no matter which promotion you love.
And then it is the main event segment, and Excalibur is joined by Ian Riccaboni and Caprice Coleman, who get to call the main event, and they only stated on Tuesday that they got the call for this. So I'm imagining this all came together in the last 48 hours, or I should say, 36 hours probably. And Ian calls this is a celebration of Jay Briscoe's life. We've got Bobby Cruz in the ring and Paul Turner as the referee. So really just like the perfect people in place for this tribute. And out comes Jay Lethal along with Sanjay Dutt. Both are wearing Jay Briscoe shirts. They were ditching the character work. It was like, this is separate from AEW. It was like, this is its own thing, and we are not playing our characters.
Lethal was like already near tears from the moment he walked out. Mm-hmm. And so was Sanjay, for that matter. They both looked incredibly emotional just, upon walkout here.
And we go to break and we come back, and then you hear the Briscoes theme, and Mark comes out to just a gigantic ovation, and he's holding the ROH tag titles, which I mean was just like a shot in the gut when you're watching, as he comes up and he holds these tag titles and is introduced as one half of the ROH tag team champions. And they shake hands at the start, and Jay Lethal is in tears at the start of this. Ian is mentioning all of Jay Briscoe's family members, and they build up to this chop battle. Mark does the redneck kung fu, and when he does this crowd gets to their feet with a standing ovation. Mark hits an iconoclasm, and then the lethal combination is hit, and Jay goes for the lethal injection, hits it, but Mark rolls to the floor. Again, a round of applause as the announcers are explaining that Mark was always the strategist of the team, and he was so smart, and he's showing his strategy here of getting out of the ring. And Mark then gets placed onto the timekeeper's table, and Lethal climbs to the turnbuckle, but is stopped by Jay. Jay gets stopped on the turnbuckle, and Mark hits the running blockbuster off the apron and puts Jay onto the timekeeper's table and proceeds to hit Froggy Bow, and the place explodes for this. Into the ring they go. Lethal counters the Jay Driller, and then the lethal injection gets caught with a lariat, and Mark hits his own lariat and wins with the Jay Driller. Just a fantastic presentation here that this audience loved. Mark then climbs over to the center, or to the side of the ring, and into the camera mentions Jay's children, all three of them, and telling his brother that he loves him. I mean, this was just such an impactful moment that I don't think anyone will ever forget if they watch this. And then with that, the locker room emptied, and Mark went up, hugged many of the members that go way back in Ring of Honor, and that's how the show ended. I just thought this was just such an amazing tribute. A show you'll never forget, I think, in wrestling.
It was the moment of catharsis that I think so much of us were looking for last week that we never had. And I thought it was great. It reminded me a lot of the Owen Hart tribute match, between Brett and between Brett and Benoit. Except this one was a lot more immediate, and honestly, it wasn't even so much about the match, and more so just about the fact that they had the spotlight, and you were keeping Jay Briscoe in everybody's thoughts. Everybody got a chance to focus and think about Jay Briscoe, and I thought the closing scene was wonderful. You saw the genuine emotion in everybody's eyes, and I guess if there's any sort of silver lining, to the fact that they didn't do this last week, it's the fact that waiting a week probably made it a bit more possible for Mark Briscoe to be involved.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we should be thanking him, for building up the courage to perform tonight. And maybe he requested it, and so it probably was helpful for him as well. But it was like a nice bit of levity to what has been, a pretty tough week for, I would say, a lot of wrestling fans.
Yeah, I just thought it was so beautifully done, and it was just a great 20 minutes of programming, period, regardless of like genre. It was just wonderful to see, very, very heartfelt, and I think everyone will always just remember this. And even the line at the end, Excalibur mentioning that Jay Briscoe had an influence on the wrestling that you love. It was just like a great kind of capstone to this moment. But everyone involved in this, I just thought did a fantastic job.